The throne room of Ethera Prime was cold and quiet. Princess Velith Soren stood before her father, the Emperor, with her hands folded in front of her. Her silver skin caught the light from the tall windows, and her dark purple eyes showed no emotion. She had learned long ago to hide what she felt. "You understand what we are asking," the Emperor said. His voice was tired. The war had aged him. "This alliance with the humans is our only chance." Velith nodded slowly. "I understand, Father. They have agreed to send ships, weapons, soldiers, but they want something in return." "They want me," Velith said. The Emperor did not deny it. He looked away, unable to meet his daughter's eyes. "The human government believes a marriage between our people will make the alliance stronger. They have chosen one of their officers, a man named Daniel Cole." Velith had heard of humans, of course. Everyone in the galaxy had. They were a young species barely 200 years into space travel. They were weak, short-lived, and unremarkable. Most galactic powers ignored them. The Etherians had never paid them much attention either, until the war with the Krovax Dominion changed everything. The Krovax were brutal. They did not negotiate. They did not show mercy. In 3 years of war, they had destroyed 12 Etherian colonies and killed millions. The Empire was running out of ships, running out of soldiers, running out of time. And then the humans had offered help. It was strange, really. Humans had nothing to gain from this war. The Krovax had not attacked them, but the human government had reached out anyway, offering an alliance. The only condition was this marriage. "What do we know about this Daniel Cole?" Velith asked. Her father gestured to one of his advisors, who stepped forward with a data tablet. "Commander Daniel Cole, age 34 by human years. He serves in the United Earth Navy as a logistics and support officer. His record is clean but unremarkable. No major battles, no special honors. He appears to be an average officer." Velith felt a small twist of disappointment, though she was not sure why. Perhaps she had hoped the humans would send someone impressive, someone worthy of an Etherian princess. Instead, they were sending a paper pusher. "Why him?" she asked. The advisor shrugged. The humans did not explain their choice. "Perhaps they do not value this alliance as much as we hoped." The Emperor raised his hand. "It does not matter why they chose him. What matters is that we need their help. Velith, I would not ask this of you if there was any other way." Velith looked at her father. She saw the weight on his shoulders. She saw the fear in his eyes. He was not asking her to do this for politics. He was asking her to save their people. "I will do it," she said. "For Etheria." 3 weeks later, the human ship arrived. It was a small vessel, nothing compared to the great warships of the Etherian fleet. It landed in the royal courtyard, and Velith watched from her window as the ramp lowered and a single figure walked out. Daniel Cole was tall for a human, with broad shoulders and short brown hair. He wore a simple gray uniform with no medals or decorations. His face was calm, almost gentle. He looked around the courtyard with quiet curiosity, like a traveler visiting a new city. Velith felt her heart sink. This was the man she would spend her life with. This ordinary, unremarkable human. She went down to meet him. "Princess Velith," Daniel said, bowing his head slightly. His voice was soft and warm. "Thank you for agreeing to this arrangement. I know it cannot be easy." Velith was surprised by his words. She had expected arrogance or awkwardness. Instead, he seemed genuinely kind. "It is my duty," she said stiffly. "I do this for my people." Daniel nodded. "I understand. I hope that, in time, we can at least be friends." Friends? The word seemed so small. Velith was giving up her future, her freedom, her chance at true love. And this human wanted to be friends. She said nothing. She simply turned and led him into the palace. The wedding was held 1 week later. It was a grand ceremony, attended by nobles from across the empire and diplomats from Earth. Velith wore a gown of white and silver, and Daniel wore a formal black suit. They stood before the altar and spoke the ancient vows of the Etherian people. When it was done, they were husband and wife. That night, Velith sat alone in her chambers. Daniel had been given rooms on the other side of the palace, and she was grateful for the distance. She did not want to see him. She did not want to think about what her life had become. She walked to the window and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Krovaks were preparing their next attack. Somewhere out there, Etherian soldiers were dying. And here she was, married to a human she did not know and did not want. But something nagged at her dot when Daniel had walked off the ship. She had seen the human guards who came with him. They were soldiers, hard-faced and serious. And when Daniel had passed them, they had straightened their backs and lowered their eyes. It was subtle, almost invisible. But Velith had been trained to notice such things. Those soldiers had not looked at Daniel like he was a logistics officer. They had looked at him like he was something to be feared. Velith shook her head. She was imagining things. Daniel Cole was nobody. Just an ordinary human sent to seal an alliance. She turned away from the window and tried to sleep. But the memory of those soldiers stayed with her, and she could not shake the feeling that something was very wrong. In the days that followed, she would learn just how right she was. The first month of marriage passed slowly. Velith kept her distance from Daniel. She attended her royal duties during the day and spent her evenings alone. When they crossed paths in the palace, she would nod politely and continue on her way. She did not hate him. She simply did not care to know him. Daniel, for his part, seemed content with this arrangement. He spent his mornings walking through the palace gardens, studying the strange Etherian plants with quiet interest. He spent his afternoons in the library, reading old Earth books he had brought with him. He was always polite to the servants, always smiling, always calm. He was, Velith thought, the most boring man she had ever met. But then the small things began to happen. It started with the human guards. A group of Earth soldiers had been assigned to the palace as part of the alliance agreement. They were stationed around the grounds, working alongside the Etherian guards. Velith paid them little attention at first. They were just soldiers doing their job, but she noticed how they acted around Daniel. Whenever he walked by, the human soldiers would stop what they were doing. They would stand straighter. Their casual conversations would go quiet, and they would watch him with a look in their eyes that Velith could not quite name. It was not respect. Respect was what they showed to their commanding officers. This was something deeper, something closer to fear. One afternoon, Velith saw Daniel stop to talk with one of the human guards. The guard was a young man, barely out of training. Daniel smiled and asked him about his family back on Earth. The conversation was friendly and normal. But when Daniel walked away, the young guard let out a long breath. His hands were shaking. Velith did not understand. What could possibly be frightening about Daniel Cole? Then came the diplomats. A delegation from Earth arrived at the palace to discuss the details of the military alliance. They were senior officials, powerful men and women who commanded fleets and made decisions that affected billions of lives. Velith expected them to treat Daniel as what he was supposed to be, a minor officer chosen for a political marriage. Instead, they treated him like royalty. During the formal dinner, Velith sat at the head of the table with Daniel beside her. The Earth diplomats spoke to her with proper respect, as befitting a princess. But when they spoke to Daniel, their tone changed. They chose their words more carefully. They asked for his opinion on matters they should have decided themselves. At one point, the chief diplomat, a silver-haired woman named Admiral Catherine Webb, leaned close to Daniel and spoke in a low voice. Velith could not hear what she said, but but she saw Daniel's response. He simply shook his head and said, "Not here. Not now." The Admiral nodded and did not bring up the subject again. After dinner, Velith found herself walking through the palace halls, her mind full of questions. She turned a corner and stopped. The door to the training hall was open, and light spilled out into the corridor. Velith moved quietly toward the door and looked inside. Daniel was there, alone. He had removed his jacket and stood in the center of the hall in a simple shirt and pants. Around him, 6 training drones hovered in the air. These were advanced combat machines, used to train Aetherian soldiers. They could be set to different difficulty levels, from beginner to elite. The display panel on the wall showed that they were set to maximum difficulty. Velith almost called out to warn him. At maximum difficulty, these drones were dangerous. Even skilled Aetherian warriors had been injured fighting just 2 or 3 at once. But before she could speak, Daniel moved. He moved like nothing Velith had ever seen. The drones attacked from all directions, firing stun blasts and swinging metal arms. Daniel flowed between them like water. He did not seem to dodge so much as simply not be where the attacks landed. His hands moved in quick, precise motions, striking weak points on the machines with perfect accuracy. In less than 30 seconds. All 6 drones lay broken on the floor. Daniel stood among the wreckage, breathing slowly. His face was calm. His eyes were cold. Then he looked up and saw Velith watching from the doorway. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Daniel's expression softened, and the gentle smile returned to his face. "Princess," he said, "I did not hear you come in. Would you like to join me for tea?" Velith stared at him. Her heart was pounding in her chest. The man who had just destroyed 6 elite combat drones was asking her if she wanted tea. "Who are you?" she whispered. Daniel tilted his head. "I am your husband, Daniel Cole." "No." Velith stepped into the training hall. "No, you are not just Daniel Cole. I have seen how the soldiers look at you. I have seen how the diplomats speak to you. And now I have seen what you can do." She pointed at the broken drones. "A logistics officer does not fight like that." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. "You are very observant," he said. "Most people do not notice. Tell me the truth." Daniel looked at her, and for the first time, Velith saw something real behind his eyes. Not the gentle kindness he always showed. Something harder. Something darker. "The truth is complicated," he said, "and dangerous. Are you sure you want to know?" Velith lifted her chin. "I am an Aetherian princess. I do not fear the truth." Daniel smiled, but it was a sad smile. "Everyone fears the truth, princess. Even me." He walked past her toward the door. "Come, let us have tea, and I will tell you what I can." Velith followed him, her mind racing. She had married a stranger, thinking she knew exactly what he was. Now she realized she had no idea what kind of man shared her home. And for the first time since the wedding, she was truly curious to find out. Daniel never got the chance to explain. 3 days after the incident in the training hall, the Krovaks attacked. It happened in the middle of the night. Velith was asleep in her chambers when the first explosions shook the palace. She woke to the sound of alarms and the red glow of emergency lights. Through her window, she could see fire rising from the city below. She grabbed her weapon, a thin energy blade that every member of the royal family carried, and ran into the corridor. Chaos filled the palace. Servants ran screaming through the halls. Guards shouted orders that no one followed. Somewhere in the distance, she heard the sound of weapons fired. An Aetherian officer ran toward her. His armor was scorched, and blood ran down his face. "Princess, you must hide," he gasped. "The Krovaks have landed ground forces. They are already inside the palace. How is this possible? Velith demanded. Our orbital defenses should have stopped them. They used stealth ships. We did not see them until it was too late. The officer grabbed her arm. Please, Princess. You must reach the safe room. Before Velith could respond, the wall beside them exploded. She was thrown to the ground. Dust and debris filled the air. When her vision cleared, she saw the officer lying motionless beside her. And standing in the hole in the wall were 3 Krovax soldiers. The Krovax were massive creatures, 8 feet tall with thick gray skin and 4 arms. They wore black armor and carried heavy plasma rifles. Their faces were flat and expressionless, their eyes glowing red in the darkness. Velith rose to her feet and raised her blade. She knew she could not defeat 3 Krovax soldiers alone. But she was a princess of Etheria. She would not die cowering. The lead Krovax made a sound that might have been laughter. He raised his rifle and aimed it at her chest. Then a voice spoke from the shadows behind her. Step away from my wife. Daniel Cole walked out of the darkness. He was unarmed. He wore simple sleeping clothes, as if he had just gotten out of bed. His feet were bare. He looked like a man who had wandered into the wrong place at the wrong time. But something was different. His posture had changed. His shoulders were squared, his spine straight. His hands hung loose at his sides, fingers slightly curved. And his eyes were not soft and gentle anymore. They were cold, empty, like the eyes of a predator. The Krovax soldiers turned their weapons toward him. The lead soldier spoke in broken galactic common. Human, you will die first. Daniel did not respond. He simply moved. Velith had seen him fight the training drones. That had been impressive. This was something else entirely. Daniel crossed the distance to the first Krovax in less than a heartbeat. His hand shot out and struck the soldier's throat with such force that the creature's neck bent at an impossible angle. The Krovax collapsed without making a sound. The second soldier fired his plasma rifle. Daniel was not there. He had already moved, sliding beneath the blast and coming up inside the soldier's guard. His fingers found the gaps in the Krovax armor and drove into soft flesh. The soldier screamed and fell. The third soldier tried to run. Daniel caught him by the back of the neck, lifted him off the ground, and threw him through the wall. 3 Krovax. 3 seconds. All dead. Daniel stood among the bodies, breathing slowly. He turned to look at Velith. Are you hurt? He asked. His voice was calm, almost gentle. Velith could not speak. She could only stare at the man she had married. The man she had thought was ordinary. More. Sounds came from deeper in the palace. Screams. Explosions. The fighting was spreading. Daniel's eyes hardened. The Krovax will be heading for the throne room. Your father is there. He started walking toward the sound of battle. After a moment, Velith followed. What she saw that night would stay with her for the rest of her life. Daniel moved through the palace, like death itself. Every room they entered held more Krovax soldiers. Every room they left held only corpses. He did not use weapons. He did not need them. His hands and feet were weapons enough. The Krovax were elite warriors, bred for combat since birth. They towered over Daniel and outweighed him by hundreds of pounds. It did not matter. He killed them anyway. He broke their bones. He crushed their throats. He tore through their armor with his bare hands. At one point, a plasma blast caught him in the shoulder. Velith saw the wound, saw the blood. Any other human would have fallen. Daniel simply kept moving. They reached the throne room to find it under siege. 20 Krovax soldiers had cornered the Emperor and his guards. The guards were fighting bravely, but they were losing. Bodies lay everywhere. Daniel did not slow down. He walked through the door and into the middle of the enemy. What happened next was not a battle. It was a slaughter. Daniel killed without hesitation and without mercy. He moved so fast that the Krovaks could not track him. He struck with such power that their armor meant nothing. He took wounds that should have killed him and kept fighting. Within 2 minutes, every Krovaks in the throne room was dead. Daniel stood in the center of the carnage, surrounded by the bodies of his enemies. His clothes were soaked with blood, both his own and theirs. His breathing was heavy now, and Velith could see that his wounds were serious, but he was still standing. The Emperor stared at Daniel with wide eyes. He had seen warriors before. He had never seen anything like this. "What are you?" the Emperor whispered. Daniel swayed on his feet. The cold emptiness faded from his eyes, and for a moment, he looked like the gentleman Velith had first met. "Just a human," he said quietly. Then he collapsed to the floor. Daniel did not wake for 3 days. The palace doctors worked on him constantly, struggling to understand human biology well enough to treat his wounds. He had been shot 4 times, stabbed twice, and had broken bones in both hands. Any normal human would have died. The doctor said it was a miracle he was alive at all. Velith stayed by his side. She did not know why. Perhaps it was guilt for how she had treated him. Perhaps it was curiosity about who he really was. Or perhaps it was something else, something she was not ready to name. On the 3rd day, Daniel opened his eyes. Velith was sitting in a chair beside his bed, reading a report on the attack. The Krovaks' assault had been stopped, but the damage was severe. Hundreds of Aetherians had died in the fighting. The palace was in ruins, but it would have been much worse without Daniel. "You should be resting," Daniel said. His voice was weak but steady. Velith looked up and found him watching her. His gray eyes were soft again, the cold emptiness gone. "You almost died," she said. "I think I can miss some sleep." Daniel smiled slightly. "I've almost died many times. I am still here." Velith set down her report. She had waited 3 days for this conversation. She was not going to wait any longer. "Who are you?" she asked. "And do not tell me you are just a logistics officer. I saw what you did. I saw how you fought. No ordinary human can do what you did." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. He stared at the ceiling, and Velith saw something heavy in his expression. Sadness, perhaps, or regret. "On Earth," he said slowly, "they call me different things. Some call me the Ghost of Centauri. Others call me the Butcher of Kepler Station." He paused. "My enemies called me the God of War." Velith felt a chill run through her. She had heard those names before. Everyone in the galaxy had. They were legends, stories told to frighten enemies of humanity. "The Ghost of Centauri," she repeated. "The human who destroyed an entire Vorn fleet by himself." "Not by myself," Daniel said. "I had help. But yes, that was me. And the Battle of Proxima?" Daniel closed his eyes. 10,000 humans against 200,000 Vorn raiders. "We held the line for 19 days until reinforcements arrived. When it was over, I was the only one from my unit still standing." Velith stared at him. The story she had heard did not do justice to the truth. The man lying in this bed was not just a soldier. He was one of the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy. "Why did you hide this?" she asked. "Why pretend to be ordinary?" Daniel opened his eyes and looked at her. "Because I am tired of being a weapon." The words hung in the air between them. "I have fought in 12 wars," Daniel continued. "I have killed more enemies than I can count. Every time Earth faces a threat, they send me. Every time things go wrong, I am the one who fixes it." He shook his head. "I am good at killing, but that is not all I want to be." "So you agreed to this marriage," Velith said softly. "To escape?" "No, not to escape." Daniel turned his head to look at her fully. "I agreed because I wanted to try something different. I wanted to be a husband instead of a killer. I wanted to have a garden and read books and drink tea in the morning." He smiled sadly. I wanted to be normal, even if only for a little while. Velith did not know what to say. She had spent weeks ignoring this man, dismissing him as unimportant. Now she realized that he had given up everything to come here. He had left behind his reputation, his purpose, his entire identity, all for the chance at a quiet life. And then the Krovaks had attacked, and he had become the weapon again. Because that was what she needed. What her people needed. I am sorry, Vela said. Daniel looked surprised. For what? For how I treated you. I thought you were nothing. I was wrong. Daniel smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. You do not need to apologize. You did not know. I did not want you to know. But why? If I had known who you were, I would have treated you differently. That is exactly why I did not tell you. Daniel reached out and took her hand. His grip was gentle, despite the bandages covering his fingers. I did not want you to see me as a weapon. I wanted you to see me as a man. Even if that man seemed boring and ordinary. Velith looked down at their joined hands. She thought about everything she had learned. Daniel Cole, the ghost of Centauri, the god of war, one of the most feared humans in the galaxy, had come to her world hoping to be seen as a normal person, and she had granted him that wish without even knowing it. What happens now? She asked. Daniel's expression grew serious. The Krovaks will learn what happened here. They will learn who stopped their attack. And when they do, they will either run or come back with a larger force. You think they will run? Daniel smiled, and this time there was something dangerous in it. Something that reminded her of the man she had seen in battle. I think they would be smart to run. But the Krovaks are not known for being smart. Velith squeezed his hand. Then we will face them together. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Together, he agreed. And for the first time since her marriage, Velith felt like she was not alone. News traveled fast across the galaxy. Within a week, every major power knew what had happened on Aetheri Prime. A Krovaks assault force had attacked the Imperial Palace. Over 200 elite Krovak soldiers had landed. None of them had survived, and most of them had been killed by a single human. The name, Daniel Cole, spread through the stars like fire. Intelligence agencies scrambled to uncover everything they could about him. Military commanders studied reports of the battle, trying to understand what they were dealing with. And the Krovaks' dominion fell silent. For 3 weeks, there was no word from the enemy. No attacks. No threats. Nothing. Then the message came. The Krovaks' High Command sent a formal communication to the Aetherian Empire. They requested a ceasefire. They were willing to negotiate terms for peace. The Emperor could not believe it. The Krovaks never negotiated. They conquered or they died. That was their way. But everything had changed. The Krovaks had learned who Daniel Cole really was. They had studied his history and read the reports of his battles. And they had reached a simple conclusion. They could win the war against the Aetherians. But they could not win a war against the ghost of Centauri. Not when he was fighting alongside the Aetherian fleet. Not when Earth had sent reinforcements to support the alliance. The peace negotiations lasted 2 months. The Krovaks agreed to withdraw from all Aetherian territory. They agreed to pay compensation for the damage they had caused. They agreed to stay on their side of the border for the next 50 years. It was the first time in their history that the Krovaks had surrendered, without being completely destroyed, and everyone knew why. Velith watched the peace ceremony from the balcony of the rebuilt palace. Beside her, Daniel stood quietly, watching the Krovaks' diplomats sign the treaty. He wore simple clothes and no medals. He looked like an ordinary man, but everyone in the room kept glancing at him. The Krovaks' diplomats could not hide their fear. The Aetherian nobles whispered among themselves. The Earth officials stood a little straighter, Daniel Cole, the god of war, had ended the war without firing another shot. His presence alone had been enough. After the ceremony, Velith and Daniel walked through the palace gardens. The plants had regrown since the attack, their strange colors bright in the afternoon sun. Daniel stopped beside a fountain and sat on the edge, looking up at the sky. "You should be proud," Velith said, sitting beside him. "You saved my people." Daniel shook his head. "I fought. Your people did the rest. You are too modest. Maybe." Daniel smiled slightly. "Or maybe I just do not want to think about it. Every life I took was a life ended. Even enemies deserve some thought." Velith studied his face. In the months since the attack, she had learned much about this man. She had learned that he woke early every morning to tend the garden. She had learned that he loved old earth poetry and terrible human jokes. She had learned that he was kind to servants and patient with children. She had also learned that he had nightmares. She had heard him cry out in his sleep, speaking names she did not recognize. The names of friends he had lost. The names of enemies he had killed. The god of war carried heavy burdens. "What will you do now?" she asked. "The war is over. You could return to Earth." Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he turned to look at her. "Do you want me to leave?" Velith felt her heart skip. It was a simple question, but it held so much weight. "No," she said softly. "I do not want you to leave." Daniel smiled, and his eyes warmed. "Then I will stay." They sat together in silence, watching the sun set over the palace gardens. Velith thought about how much had changed. She had married this man out of duty, expecting nothing. She had dismissed him as ordinary, as unimportant. Now she could not imagine her life without him. "Daniel," she said. "Yes?" "I think I am starting to love you." The words came out before she could stop them. She felt heat rise to her cheeks. She had not meant to say it so directly, but Daniel just smiled. He reached over and took her hand. "I know," he said. "I have been starting to love you too." They sat together as the last light faded from the sky. Two people from different worlds, brought together by politics and war. But somewhere along the way, duty had turned into something else. That night, they had dinner together on the balcony. They talked about small things. Books and gardens and the strange customs of their different peoples. They laughed at silly jokes and argued about which planet had better food. For a few hours, they were not a princess and a legendary warrior. They were just a husband and wife. Later, as the twin moons rose over Etheria Prime, Daniel stood at the balcony railing and looked up at the stars. Velith came to stand beside him. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "The future," Daniel said. "For the first time in a long time, I am thinking about the future." "And what do you see?" Daniel turned to her. His gray eyes were soft, filled with something she had never seen there before. "I see us," he said simply. "Growing old together. Raising children, maybe. Building something that is not about war or death or duty." He smiled. "I see a life worth living." Velith felt tears prick at her eyes. She had never expected this. Never expected to find love in a political marriage. Never expected the god of war to want nothing more than a quiet life with her. "Then let us build it together," she said. Daniel pulled her close and held her under the light of the twin moons. Behind them, the palace stood rebuilt and strong. Above them, the stars shone bright with possibility. The war was over. The future was waiting. And for the first time, both of them were ready to face it. Not as a princess and a weapon, but as partners. As equals. As something even the god of war had never expected to find. A family.